I thought I would make a quick video for those of you all who are just getting into shooting, who may not be very familiar with firearms. And what we're going to do is actually look at some of the key points that you want to consider before buying a used gun. When most people go into a gun store, they're intimidated by the prices a lot of times, especially if they're not familiar with the value of firearms and that sort of thing. And it can come as a little bit of a shock to them. But then they look over in the used sections of firearms that a lot of your gun stores have, and they can see some prices that are a little bit more within their range. And in those different scenarios, in those different instances, you can get a lot of gun for not a lot of money if you know what you're looking for. Just a few key considerations that you want to make, of course, is how good a condition is that firearm in. And I'm going to show you a few ways to inspect the firearm to help you to better make that choice. If you're not very familiar with guns, I would highly suggest that you buy one, if you're going to buy a used one, that you buy one from someone who you know very well, or from a reputable dealer. Don't just go to someone that you've never met before, that you've seen online, and buy a gun that they have. You may or may not be getting a good value. You could be getting something that's a piece of junk and you've just wasted your money. So, buy one from someone that you know, or from a reputable gun shop. But they're generally not going to put something out on the shelf that is unsafe or that is not reliable. They're just not going to do that. I mean, it will hurt their reputation, and people are going to turn away from them. I'm not saying that all gun shops are like that, but most of your reputable gun shops simply will not put junk firearms out to sell. The first thing that you want to look at if you are looking at a semi-automatic, of course, first of all, is to make sure that the firearm is unloaded. And just for video, you can see there is nothing in this gun. But one of the first things that I would suggest that you do with a semi-automatic, of course, is to lock that slide back. You want to inspect that chamber. Drop the magazine out of it if they have left an empty mag in it. For safety purposes, especially, just because the gun shop owner or operator, someone who works there, checks the firearm, check it yourself. Get the gun, look down the bore, make sure there's nothing in there. Also look at the chamber, look at the feed ramp. Make sure that everything in there is smooth. If there's any nicks, if there's any dings or anything like that, that can cause you feeding problems. You're more than likely not going to be able to disassemble the handgun in the store before you purchase it. It depends on the store. Some shops may allow you to do that, and if they do, great. But for the most part, most shops will not let you. And what you want to do is to look over the gun very well. You want to look to see if there are any areas of surface rust or unusual discoloration, and you want to see if you can see any areas of excessive wear. And while you have that action locked in the open position, I would suggest that you look at the guide rod and you look at the barrel very carefully. And what you want to look for, again, is any type of surface rust, any pitting, especially any cracks or any unusual discolorations in the metal. Something else that you're going to want to do as well is to take the sights and just give them a gentle push to make sure that they're not loose, that they do not move around on you. You can find some handguns that have been abused or there have been issues with, and those sights will actually just push right off. And it can be something that can be repaired, but do you really want to spend your money on something that is defective right out of the box? So that's something that you want to be sure that you consider. After you have inspected the frame of the weapon, close that action, and you want to function test everything. For this particular gun, I have to have the magazine in it to be able to function test it. One of the first things that you want to function test is the safety. If you have that safety engaged, will it cycle that hammer? Will it fire? Once again, make sure that it is unloaded, pointed in a safe direction. Then you want to disengage that safety. You want to pull that trigger and you want to snap it. Now, depending on the firearm, there's some manufacturers, some brands you cannot do that with. You can actually damage the firearm, so you do not want to do that. But on brands that you can, once you have that hammer pulled, that you have pulled that trigger, hold that trigger back. Then cycle that action back and then bring it back closed. Then release the trigger and listen for a click. There we are. You will want to look over the gun very carefully to make sure that there are no missing screws, that none of the pins are loose. Look for damage. You know, if it is a used gun, there are going to be some scratches possibly. It just depends on how well the previous owner cared for it. And make your decision from there. If it's a firearm that is still in manufacture, you may want to consider the price between a new one and a used one. If the price difference is not very much, you may be better off going with a new one depending on the condition of the used one that you're looking at. Another thing that you're going to want to consider on a semi-automatic is the magazines. You want to consider the cost of replacing any of the magazines that you may need to due to wear, or if you just like to have a couple of extra magazines for your gun, as well as availability. There are some handguns out there that it is very difficult to get the magazines for, and when you do find them, they're often very expensive. So that's something that you're going to want to consider as well. When you're looking at a revolver, some of the same principles will apply. And you can see here, we are empty. There are no rounds in that chamber. Of course, you will want to function test that gun. Pull that trigger, make sure that it works, release. Also, you may want to check to see if it works in single action. Works well. Something you really want to consider on a revolver is the cylinder, how well that cylinder lockup is. With the hammer all the way forward, your finger off of the trigger, take that cylinder and gently try to rock it back and forth. If there is excessive movement in that cylinder, don't buy that gun. One of the things that can happen is if that cylinder is misaligned when that round goes off, it can hurt you. It can cause, more damage to the firearm. It can, and it can hurt you. So that is very critical when you consider a used revolver. Some of the same things as with a semi-automatic. Make sure that you do not see any missing screws, missing pins. Make sure that the sights are on solid, that there's nothing that moves around. Look over it to see if there's any obvious surface issues as far as rust. And one of the areas that gets neglected very often in cleaning is underneath the grips, especially in revolvers. There's a lot of people that will never take these things off when they clean their guns. And there are some guns that I've seen where you would take the handles off for the first time and you just have to put them in the trash because moisture or something else had gotten in under that handle and it basically rusted the handle of that gun, the frame of that gun, and it was useless. So that's something you just have to put in the trash. I mean, if it's excessive damage, you can't repair it. It's not good for anything, and it could be dangerous. You don't want that coming apart when you're shooting it. But look at the back strap and look at the front strap and make sure that there's no cracks or anything that it looks like it's coming through. And again, depending on the shop, they may allow you to take the handles off of the gun. If they do, you can take those off, kind of inspect everything there, and give you a better idea of what you're getting for your money. On a revolver also, with that hammer cocked back, push forward on it just to make sure that the trigger is doing its job. That the mechanism is actually holding that trigger back and holding the hammer back, keeping it from firing. You never know if you get a used handgun if someone has gone in and tried to do some type of a garage trigger job on one, and in some cases can make them unsafe. So that is something very critical to consider. And even in the used gun market, there may be some guns that have minor wears, the few mild scratches, that you still get a great deal on. If you can live with those little defects, just like this pistol here. I don't know if you can see it in the video, but there is a little bit of discoloration on the very end of this barrel. And that comes from holster wear. That was something that was on this gun when I bought it. But for the price and for the rest of the condition of how this gun was, it was a great deal. I have had this gun for many years. It is very reliable. I've never had any issues from it. But it is something that I wanted to show you on it. Like I say, you can get some good deals on used guns with just minor blemishes that functionally they are just as sound as they were when they were made. If you've got some friends that are into guns and you are looking for your first gun, or if there's one out there that you have some questions about, talk to them. Get them to go with you to the gun store. Let them look at the gun and help you make that decision. If it's someone you can trust. Also, another good resource is, of course, YouTube. You can get online and find video reviews of virtually any firearm that has ever been made. I have yet to not be able to find a video on any particular firearm that I was looking for. And I would even suggest looking up some of the fail videos and, where people have had issues with that particular gun that you're looking at. That way you'll have a little better understanding of exactly what some of the potential failures are with that gun and whether those complaints are even legitimate. I have seen some people that would take a handgun, replace the factory trigger in the gun, have issues with it, and then complain that the gun itself was junk because the new trigger that they put in doesn't work correctly. So that's something to consider as well. Anyways, guys, hope you liked the video. Be sure to subscribe, drop me any comments down below, and if you have any comments on that, I'd love to hear from you. Now let's have a conversation about this. Firearms is something that are fun, that I'm into. If you're watching this video, you're either into them yourself or you are thinking about getting into them. Anyways, guys, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.